Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into the art of the true story, a type of writing that kind of blurs the line between hard fact and creative storytelling to create something, well, something you just can't forget. So let's think about this for a second. You've heard someone tell a true story, right? Of course you have. But what is it that makes one person's account so captivating you're hanging on every word, while another one just fizzles out, even if the events themselves were pretty dramatic? And that really leads us to these two very different ways of telling the truth. It's a contrast you've definitely seen before, probably at a party or just listening to friends talk. Okay, so on one side, you have the person who's basically just a reporter. They give you the bare facts, it's direct, sure, but it's also pretty dry. Then, on the other side, you've got that amazing storyteller, the one who makes a simple trip to the grocery store sound like an epic quest. They don't just tell you what happened, they pull you right into the moment with them. Now, that amazing storyteller, whether they even realize it or not, is actually practicing an art form called creative nonfiction. They're taking the raw material of real life and shaping it into something truly compelling. So, what is creative nonfiction exactly? And how is it any different from, say, a news report? Well, the answer is where all the magic and, honestly, all the controversy really begins. The key thing to remember is that it all starts with the truth. What really happened. But, and this is the crucial part, it presents that truth using the exact same tools a novelist would use. The whole point isn't just to inform you, it's to make you feel something. It's about taking the facts and making them feel alive. Okay, let's use an example. Imagine someone's telling you they got into a car accident. The standard nonfiction way of telling this story is super direct. It's all about getting the information across as quickly as possible. Right? You get the information, but there's no emotion. There's no drama. It's just a sterile report. You understand what happened, but you don't feel a thing. Okay, now let's see how a creative nonfiction writer might tackle the exact same event. This is where we shift from just reporting a fact to actually recreating an experience for the reader. Whoa, see the difference? It's huge. This just perfectly shows the power of descriptive detail. Wham! Punched into their teeth, a tsunami of coffee. You're not just being told what happened, you are right there, experiencing the chaos and the shock of that moment. Here's another way to think about it. Your old chemistry textbook, that gives you the facts about chemical reactions. But a memoir by a brilliant chemist, that gives you the lived experience, the discovery, the failures, the passion. One informs you, the other completely immerses you. That's really the core difference right there. So how in the world do writers actually pull this off? Well, it's not magic. They use a very specific set of tools to craft these true stories. They basically have this whole toolkit they've borrowed straight from fiction writing. They build scenes that you can see and feel. They write dialogue to make people sound real. They build tension to keep you turning the page. Every single one of these tools is designed to make a true story read just like a great novel. But using all these tools, well, it brings up a really big question, doesn't it? If you're adding all these creative elements, you're building scenes, maybe writing dialogue from memory, where do you draw the line? When does art just become a lie? And this brings us to what is easily the most debated, most controversial part of this whole genre, the ethics of telling the truth creatively. It's kind of like a high-wire act, and if you fall, the consequences are very, very real. At the absolute heart of all this is the idea of a pact. Think of it like an unspoken promise between the writer and you, the reader. You agree to trust the writer's story, and in return, the writer promises that the foundation of that story is factual and true. Now, there's sort of a general agreement in the writing world about what's okay and what's not. For example, trying to reconstruct a conversation you had 20 years ago as best you can, most people say that's okay. But inventing major events or making up quotes out of thin air? Nope, that's a clear violation of that trust. It's a total betrayal of the pact. So what happens when a writer breaks this pact in a really, really public way? Well, let's look at probably the most infamous case study in the entire history of creative nonfiction. Back in 2003, a writer named James Frey published this incredibly raw and powerful memoir about his struggle with addiction. It was called A Million Little Pieces. It became a massive bestseller, and it even got this huge endorsement from Oprah. But then an investigative report came out, and it revealed that he had just made up significant parts of his story. That 3-month jail stint? It was only a few hours. That tragic train accident he was involved in? Never happened. He tried to claim he just took a creative license to get at some deeper emotional truth. The public backlash was absolutely immense. He was brought back onto national television, where Oprah, who had been his biggest supporter, publicly and very famously called him a liar for betraying the trust of millions of readers. It was a truly brutal and unforgettable takedown. And this is exactly why it mattered so much, because he called it a memoir, a work of nonfiction. The things he made up weren't seen as creative. They were seen as what they were, lies. The pact was completely shattered, and his book became this huge cautionary tale for every single writer in the genre. So at the end of the day, this genre requires a ton of skill and a deep sense of self-awareness. It's really about finding that delicate balance, telling a compelling story using all the tools of literature, while still honoring the fundamental truth of the experience you're trying to share. And all this leaves us with a pretty big question to think about. When you pick up a true story, what are you really looking for? The literal down-to-the-second facts, or the emotional truth of the experience? It's a question every writer and every reader in this genre has to answer for themselves. And maybe, just maybe, the line between them is a lot finer than we think.